For a nation that prides itself on its democracy, America hasn't made the act of voting particularly easy.
We have 13,000 election jurisdictions in this country that run elections 13,000 different ways. Election officials get to do different things from one place to the next. Some voters vote on different kinds of ballots from others. And so we have different rules about who can register and who can't from state to state. And it's really not one America when it comes to voting. There are cracks in our democracy. In fact, the way that elections are run is dysfunctional.
Electoral dysfunction. Where's the pill for this affliction?
I'm Mo Rocca, American. And as an American, I'm proud that I have the right to vote. Or do I? For answers, I consulted the Constitution.
This is the wrong copy, I think.
No, this is the
No, this is the Constitution.
This is the Constitution.
Yeah. A close reading of the Constitution didn't turn up anything about the right to vote.
There is no right to vote in the Constitution.
You're not kidding me.
No, I'm not kidding you. The Constitution at the nation's birth made no mention of voting rights whatsoever.
Did they just forget to?
No, they didn't forget to. They were unsure, in fact, whether voting was a right or a privilege.
Is voting a right or a privilege?
Right.
Is voting a right or a privilege?
I think it's a both.
You have to choose.
I have to choose between a right and a privilege.
That's the way the game is played.
Oh, I think it's a right.
What does your friend think?
Tyler, do you think voting is a right or a privilege? He thinks it's a right too.
Voting is a privilege, which is what I tell my students.
I think if you're a citizen, then you should have the right to vote.
And if it was a right, they weren't sure who the right actually belonged to. And in fact, if you look closely at the Constitution, the only office that they refer to as being elected is for the House of Representatives.
This constitutional silence on the right to vote puts the U.S. in some interesting company, including Chechnya, Libya, and Iran.
What we have is a kind of ragtag series of ad hoc constitutional amendments that say you can't discriminate on the basis of race, the 15th Amendment. You can't discriminate on the basis of sex, the 19th Amendment. But other than these kind of anti-discrimination amendments, we don't have the affirmative universal right to vote like you find in the South Africa Constitution, which just simply says everybody's got a right to vote. That's what it means to have a democracy. That's what we the people really means.
Jamie told me that the drafters of the Constitution sidestepped the conflict by leaving the decision about who could or could not vote up to the states. It all started when 13 colonies decided to hook up and make a go of it. But as in any relationship, they didn't want to give up all their independence. Each colony wanted the power to make its own rules, because, this new country could be so smothering at times. Eventually, the new nation decided it needed to start seeing other states. 37 to be exact. Hey, don't judge, it was a different time. And each state brought its own baggage, of course. Cities, towns, and counties, all of which wanted their own say in how to conduct elections. After more than 200 years, this loosey-goosey union has grown very complicated. 13,000 separate electoral districts, each with its own rules about voting, ballot design, poll worker training, and recounts. And most of the blame goes to that Constitution, which gave states control over voting and set up the Electoral College. Do you know where I can find the Electoral College?
No, I'm from Tennessee.
The Electoral College was created after a summer that the Founding Fathers spent scratching their heads and trying to figure out how to choose a president. One thought was to have Congress choose the president. And they thought, no, that would make the president too dependent on Congress. There were a few people who said, let's have a national election. But that was opposed partly because it was felt that people wouldn't know the candidates. It's a rural country spread out. The other reason against a popular election was that it would have given less power to the slaveholding South. So they came up with this idea of having an indirect election where you choose electors and then the electors choose the president.
Sounds good in theory, but in practice, well, even a third grader can see there are problems. We're gonna have a little election here, and I'm gonna ask you to choose between two candidates, colored pencils and markers. Who is voting for colored pencils? Okay. 10 votes for colored pencils. Who is voting for markers? 14 for markers. Markers have won the popular vote. And now we're gonna have the real election. Naturally, they were disappointed. They thought we'd just had the election. But now it was time to warp these young minds by introducing them to the Electoral College. So we broke the class into 5 tables or states. The majority at each table, either markers or colored pencils, would get the table's 1 electoral vote. Of course, in real life, states have varying amounts of electoral votes, depending on the population. Table 1's elector, how do you cast your vote?
Markers.
Table 2's elector, how do you cast your vote?
Markers.
Table 3's elector.
Colored pencils.
In the end, the whole election came down to 1 state. Table 5's elector. Angel, come on down. This is it, guys. This will decide the whole thing. Elector, how do you cast your vote?
Colored pencils.
What's that?
We're still cheating. Everybody should think it's unfair because it's not just about the electors' vote, it's about everybody's vote.
Oh, Aubrey, you are a rabble-rouser. I mean, clearly you're trying to whip them up into a frenzy.
It has to be fair for everybody who voted for markers, not just for colored pencils. It's 14 to 10. It should stay that way.
This guy's a dangerous reformer. You know, it's not like this happened in real life. Oh, actually it did.
They set up this Electoral College business, and since then, nearly 1 in 10 presidents took the White House without winning the popular vote. Like me, John Quincy Adams.
I'm Rutherford B. Hayes. I lost the popular vote, and I almost caused a second civil war. Whoops, my bad. But don't blame me, blame the Electoral College.
You may not remember me. I'm Benjamin Harrison. I lost the popular vote and became president. Frankly, beyond that, even I don't know a whole lot about me.
I'm George W. Bush, and I like to think of myself as the education president, starting with my favorite college, the Electoral College.
The key thing that frustrates people about the Electoral College today is that it sidelines and marginalizes 2/3 to 3/4 of the whole country. Most of us live in red states or blue states. Take our 4 biggest states. 3 of them are safe states. Texas, a red state, California, a blue state, New York, a blue state. Only Florida is sometimes a swing state. That means in 3 of our 4 biggest states, there's no campaigning. The voter turnout rate is like 5 to 10 points lower than it is in the swing states where all the TV ads are. Why should the vast majority of the public have no real role in electing the president? It doesn't make any sense.
Does this make any sense? A creaky electoral college, a constitution that doesn't guarantee us the right to vote. And yet every year there's an election of some kind somewhere. If I was going to understand how voting really works in America, I'd need to jump into the thick of it. In a swing state, of course, since those are the ones that actually decide our elections. A place where the passion for politics runs deep, right smack in the middle of America's heartland.
Back home again in Indiana.
That's right, Indiana, the Hoosier State, home to some of the toughest election laws in the country. A swing state for the first time in decades, and record holder for the closest congressional race in U.S. history, the Bloody Eighth. If I was looking for the front lines in the battle over voting, I had come to the right place.
Long for my Indiana
I have one job, one job only. My job is to turn out every Democrat voter, get them out to vote. Yes, did you call Democrat headquarters in Jennings County? I've been doing this for a long, long time. What can I do for you? Starting off back when I was a teenager. 7th generation here in Jennings County. Family's been here for a long time. Very strong Democrats.
Mike Marshall, a former state representative, isn't only enthusiastic, he's also effective. In 2004, Republicans won every county office except one. In 2006, after Mike started his Get Out the Vote effort, Democrats won every county office except one, creating quite a stir in southern Indiana. Across the aisle and down the road in neighboring Ripley County lives Dee Dee Benke.
Hey, Larry.
Dee Dee once worked at the Bush White House with Karl Rove and was recently elected to the Republican National Committee.
I first got involved in politics when I was in high school. I think the spirit of being political was there early. I think it's important to be active, not someone to sit on the sidelines.
Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. The big red one.
I ended up working with the Bush campaign because I was in a leadership position with young Republicans. Of course, I was a very low-level staffer, but President Bush couldn't have been nicer. After I left the White House, I wanted to come back home to Indiana, back to my roots, and really do a lot of on-the-ground political work. Because a lot of times when you're in Washington, people, I think they lose touch with the real world, and I just wanted to go home.
While Dee Dee worked the crowd at the parade, back in Jennings County, Mike Marshall focused on getting out the vote.
I went to her house at 11 o'clock last night, and I'd been out there 3 other different days because we had to get her signed up by the deadline last night, by midnight. We found her home at 11:15. She was asleep. I woke her up. We got her signed up, and so it would arrive in the election office last night by fax before the midnight deadline. And I was very satisfied. That's a rush to me.
Part of Mike's effectiveness comes from his ability to negotiate Indiana's voting statutes, especially since passage of the state's photo ID law. The first in the nation, it was quickly challenged and eventually wound up in the U.S. Supreme Court, where it was ruled constitutional, even though there had never been an instance of voter impersonation in Indiana, the only type of voter fraud the bill addresses. But hey, you never know what kind of criminal element you're going to find at the polls.
We want to tell you about some 80 and 90-year-old nuns in Indiana. They had heard the new rules that you have to come with ID, but they showed up with outdated passports and such, and they thought that they could still vote. And you know what? They were turned away. They were barred from voting.
The nuns weren't alone. According to one study, an estimated 13% of Indiana's registered voters don't have the required ID. The numbers are even higher among students, the elderly, African Americans, and Latinos.
When I went back to my district and talked to my own constituents, for many of them it seemed to be a no-brainer. They were used to showing ID for a variety of common tasks, whether it was renting a movie or writing a check. So to extend this to ensure the integrity of our election process for the vast majority of my constituents seemed like something that should have been done a long time ago.
We have the strictest voter ID law in the country. We have turned away hundreds of people who have not had this ID that they need. It's shameful, and part of the reason I hear every day, it's just too hard.
And we've done everything that we've been asked to do in terms of making it easier for people to get ID. They can get it for free.
What isn't clearly articulated, though, is that it's not really free unless you have a host of documentation. Say you're born in Marion County, where Indianapolis is located. You go to the Marion County Health Department. You fill out this form. It's going to cost you about $12 to get your birth certificate. For most people, $12 is not a big deal. But what if it is? That's a financial barrier. You then have to have this form signed by a notary public, which again is going to cost you something. But this is kind of the kicker here. The notary public has to mark one of these 4 boxes, that you have brought in either a valid driver's license, a valid state identification card, a valid military card, or a valid passport. If you had any of these things, you wouldn't need to request
Your birth certificate. So it's kind of a catch-22.
Yes.
But voter ID laws are the new modern-day poll tax. They're not preventing fraud, they're preventing voting.
I caught up with Dee Dee at her home in Ripley County, where she and a group of high school students were preparing for a Sarah Palin rally.
Hey everybody, this is Mel Rocca.
Hi, how are you? Hi. Dee Dee supports the photo ID law. What angers her is an item called the absentee ballot, a tool Mike Marshall depends on, and one that requires no photo ID at all.
You have to show your photo ID to vote. Well, you should. You have to show your photo ID to Blockbuster. You know, I mean, okay. I mean, how many times do we have to whip out the ID just about, you know, for everything? So that's good. But for absentee ballots, there's some wiggle room. That's not good. I think it should be the same level.
So it concerns you?
It concerns me greatly.
Dee Dee was certainly passionate about the absentee ballot issue, but I wondered if the average Hoosier was as worried as she was. Are you concerned about voter fraud?
Yes.
What kind?
Democrats.
Dee Dee and Mike were hustling to get any unregistered folks onto the voter rolls before the state's deadline, which comes 29 days before the election. In other states, citizens can register and vote on the same day, a perfect example of the extreme inconsistency among America's 13,000 voting districts.
Okay, well, here are absentees. Okay, and they're part of this literature, and you don't have to look at that if you don't want to. I mean, it's good, though.
2 here, 1 there, another here.
You need to register to vote, is that right?
Yes.
All right.
Come get registered! Obama! Woo!
You're a sweet little puppy.
Are you registered to vote, girl? Oh, let's
Can
get
we sign you up
up.
so you can vote this year? I thought convicted felons couldn't vote.
Okay, hold the phone. People who have served their time for a felony can't vote?
No, in Indiana you can. Oh, I can?
Here's another example of what makes election laws so confusing. In Indiana, former felons are allowed to vote. But down in Mississippi, people convicted of certain felonies lose all voting rights for life. Unless, and get this, the governor pardons them or the legislature passes a personalized bill restoring their voting rights.
A Canton man convicted of voter fraud is given the maximum sentence. Terrence Watts will serve 10 years in prison for voting illegally twice.
After serving time for a felony, Watts, who was still on the registration rolls, broke the law by merely voting in 2 separate elections.
Florida has about 900,000 people with felony convictions who cannot vote. We really need to be in a place where you've done your time, you just get your rights back.
So historically, who's had the right to vote and who hasn't? Well, white guys wrote the rules, so initially they were the only ones who got the privilege. Rich, landowning white guys.
Oh, man.
After a while, they let the poor white guys vote.
Yeehaw!
And oddly, black guys in a few states.
3/5 of my best friends are black.
That ended pretty quickly. Eventually, the Irish were allowed to vote, as were some non-citizens, but only if they were white and as long as they could pay the poll tax. A few women could vote for a little while until they stopped that. And black people again, also for a little while until they stopped that again. Women finally got the right to vote in 1920. But there were major roadblocks for African Americans, like literacy tests. The kind with questions like, how many bubbles are in a bar of soap? I'm not kidding. That plan was so successful that only 5% of Mississippi's eligible black voters had managed to register as of 1960. Finally, in 1965, LBJ signed the Voting Rights Act, wiping out literacy tests. It wasn't until 1971, thanks to Vietnam and the draft, that we decided to let 18-year-olds vote. And then there are people who live in D.C. who don't have full voting rights, or even a senator. They have a representative in the House, except she doesn't get to vote. And that's who gets to vote in America.
There are 50 million Americans who are eligible voters who are not on the voter rolls. We are one of the few industrialized democracies right now that doesn't have a system of universal voter registration where the government automatically and permanently ensures that each eligible voter is on the rolls. This is the #1 cause of voter disenfranchisement, and it's the #1 source of pre-election disputes with political parties, the #1 area where you can really manipulate who gets to vote and try to knock off the other side's
divides voters.
No matter how many people are registered, though, not all voters are created equal. I set out to meet those exclusive few who actually get to cast their vote for president, the presidential electors. Meet Ben Leatherberry, a freshman at the University of Indiana and a Democratic elector from Dee Dee and Mike's congressional district. Ben's father was an elector for John Kerry in 2004. This time around, he's handed the job off to Ben, age 19. What if between November 4th and December 15th, Barack Obama does something that really ticks you off? Like something crazy, like he steals someone's car.
Okay.
Just for argument's sake.
I could vote for John McCain, and then they get my electoral vote. But in some states, I don't know about Indiana, you're supposed to sign an oath and saying that you would vote for the person you do, but there's no law against it, so you might have to pay like a penalty. I'm not sure how that works.
So, what qualifications does somebody have to become an elector?
It's not really any qualifications. It's more of what you can't do. You can't rebel against the government. If you've done that before, they don't want you to be elector.
Have you done that?
No, I haven't.
Have you come close?
Not too close. Yeah. And then another thing is they don't want you to have a high office in state politics. I think that's about it.
Well, Ben, thank you very much.
You.
It's a privilege to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
That's cool.
So I hope you learned a little bit more about Electoral College.
I think I did. And this college is not too bad either.
That's all right.
Well, take care.
All right, see you later.
Bye-bye.
Going back to Indiana.
Finally, the sun sets on the months of dogged legwork, skirmishes, and sleepless nights. And then, Election Day. At the Ripley County Courthouse, Ginger Bradford, the county clerk, opens her office.
This is the keys to unlock the your boxes over there with the absentee ballots in it.
There it is. So we need John. Two.
Like a star witness in a mob trial, the ballots are brought out under cover of darkness.
There you go. Okay, I'll see you in a little bit.
All right.
The polls are now open.
With those words, more than 900 precincts across Indiana open their doors.
Hold still.
No. Oh.
I almost got him. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It was seriously, I had it like, he was right there.
Central to Mike's Election Day operation is this polling book, a thick tome listing every Democratic voter in Jennings County.
First name?
When a Democrat votes, his or her name is checked off a list.
You'll have to see your ID up there.
The name is forwarded to headquarters, where a team of high school kids keeps a tally. This process of elimination allows Mike's team to quickly identify which Jennings County Democrats haven't voted yet.
And that's how we go after voters and make sure we get the stragglers and get them to the polls.
With everyone working so hard to get out the vote, I thought I should pitch in a little. Hey, Flo, let's go! Free ride to the polls! You remember Flo, the former felon who thought she'd been banned from voting. Are you happy to be here?
Sure.
What do you think of the ballot?
I think it's weird looking.
It's a design mess, a giant design mess.
Thinking that America's ballots might benefit from a makeover, I asked noted designer Todd Oldham to critique an assortment from around the country.
This one I don't even need to give you any sort of preface to.
Good old 2000.
Can you begin to enumerate the problems with this?
We'll go with just what's naturally counterintuitive here, and we talked about it earlier, which is left, activating left, activating right. This is not within our mindset at all. Then these things slid down behind it and were punctured. Well, you can see immediately that they don't properly line up. The spacing between this has nothing to do with the spacing between these banners here. You can't figure it out. Plus, this is 2000. I mean, I would believe this from 1942 or something.
It's like an advent calendar or something. or something.
Exactly.
And I love an advent calendar, but, that's not deciding who's president. And it says vote for group.
A group tells you to vote twice. Right. And there's nothing there that says punch only one hole, we need a third set of parentheses.
You're right.
I got his point. Palm Beach County tossed out more than 6,600 double punches for Al Gore and another candidate, and the election was decided by 537 votes statewide.
So I think what's scary is the inconsistencies of design and the fact that no one seems to be in charge. How come there's not a national consistency for these things?
I think because a lot of people think it should remain in local control.
National consistency might seem unattainable, at least here in the U.S. But there's a place not so far away where they've figured out a lot of this. Canada has had one national ballot design for almost 100 years.
You mark it with an X in the white dot. Coast to coast, Newfoundland to Vancouver and north to south.
Good afternoon, Elections Canada, Willowdale.
They've also taken the partisan rancor out of voting by establishing an independent organization that oversees all elections.
You've got to reach out to the people and make sure that the reasons for which they don't vote has nothing to do with the complexity of the system.
Either way? Does it shred them as it goes through?
No, ma'am.
So at the age of 50, Flo Perkins joined 15 million other Americans who cast ballots for the first time on this day. Nice. As the clock ticked down, it occurred to me, did these voters really know who they were voting for? Certainly not the president. Instead, they're voting for either Ben Leatherberry or David Buskill, our Democratic and Republican electors. This was something the people of Indiana deserved to know. For the presidential race, did you cast your ballot for David or for Ben?
For David or for Ben? Oh, gee, I didn't think about David or Ben.
You're voting for somebody to actually vote for your candidate, so...
I don't know.
And you were aware that he's one of the electors?
Yeah. Actually, no.
So you ended up casting your vote for
Ben.
and 10 other Obama electors.
Yes.
So that on December 15th, they can...
Vote for Barack Obama.
Okay, and that makes sense.
Yes.
Really?
No, not at all.
As it happens, most people didn't know who David and Ben were, or of the role the Electoral College plays in shaping the candidate's strategy. They just wanted to vote.
Oh, hear that bell? Hear ye! The polls are now closed!
Yes, they can start taking signs down and all of that.
Gary Continent, Patricia Continent, Kenneth Cone.
Danny, is that some of our workers from your church?
I was just over at Cross Plains, and they told me I couldn't vote over there. I had to come over here, and I voted over there the last 3 times. I'm mad. Why can't I vote right now, right here?
You need to calm down and quit yelling.
I don't care, it ain't right.
It's not our fault.
Why couldn't I vote over there?
You were not registered for that precinct.
All I want to do is vote.
The polls are closed now.
I've been over there for the last 3 elections, and now all of a sudden I'm over here.
Evidently, you did a change of registration to be voting up here.
I did not do that change of registration.
Nobody else would have done it.
Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
105 North Avenue, 52.
Well, it's the wee late hour of 6 p.m., and the polls are closed all across Indiana. Now it's time to tabulate the votes. In Ripley County, the results were immediately displayed to the public as they were calculated.
Okay, let's see. 100%. Yay! Morris, woohoo! 6,552 to 5,465. 5445, we'll take it. Got to love it. Yes.
The Republicans were doing well in many local races, but members of both parties were holding their breath for the big one. At Jennings County Democratic headquarters, a crowd was gathering to watch the first election returns.
134, 115.
The room would be packed for the next several hours as results came in. Even outside, it was standing room only.
Obama just won Pennsylvania. Obama won Pennsylvania.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
And CNN can now project that Barack Obama, 47 years old, will become the president-elect of the United States. Hello, Chicago.
So it came to be that nearly 67 million Americans cast their ballots for Barack Obama. The people, or at least those who'd managed to register and vote, had spoken. At 61% of eligible voters, it was the highest turnout since 1964. And now it was time for the real election.
Well, the big day has arrived. The first Monday after the second Wednesday in December. Election Day. And that's why I've come here to the Indiana State Capitol.
Ladies and gentlemen, as they come from the back of the room, please welcome Indiana's electors and the alternate electors.
I was here for the convening of Indiana's delegation to the Electoral College.
Todd, are we going to need a photo ID?
Good question.
With all the pomp, circumstance, and pointed barbs aside, 19-year-old Ben Leatherberry and the 10 other Democrat electors cast their historic votes.
If I can have your attention, please, I'm informed by the election division that 11 votes have been cast and tabulated, and all 11 votes have been cast for Barack Obama.
With nearly 3 million votes cast in Indiana, Barack Obama wound up with a 1% lead, entitling him to all of the state's 11 electoral votes.
Who loves living in a blue state?
All right, but wait a minute. What do you think you all did on the ground that made a difference? What was within your control?
I think the absentees are our margin of victory for our candidates. Over 55% of the working workforce in Jennings County has to drive outside of Jennings County to work, and the average of those 55% work 10-hour shifts. So it's almost impossible for them to vote.
The problem with absentee ballots is just driving me crazy, frankly. We have got to do something about it. It is not right. It is not fair to those who cast their ballot, and it counts for sure on Election Day. I'm kind of thinking, yeah, there's a good possibility that we are actually red today instead of blue. And it certainly would be terrible for Indiana to have gone blue for that reason.
And the Republicans want to say there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with the absentees because there are just so many. Well, it just happens that these people are working, and a lot of them are working a 10-hour shift, and then they're working a second job on the side because of the economy. But yes, you know what? There's nothing wrong with voting absentee. It's a vote. You only get a vote once.
It's sad to think that in this great democracy, we still find ourselves battling over voting. Do we really not agree that all law-abiding citizens deserve the right to vote? There must be some common ground. Americans hate being told what to do, so why do we have so many different sets of rules with different registration deadlines, ballot designs, polling hours, machines we vote on, ID requirements? When it comes to choosing a president, should the candidate who gets the most votes win, as in every other election? Should the Constitution be amended to include a right to vote? Oh, and most importantly, did my classroom demonstration permanently scar those children? Well, I am sure about one thing. Voting matters. So if you think our electoral system is broken, that it's overly complicated, prone to meltdowns, don't look for a little blue pill to solve the problem. The key to fixing electoral dysfunction is voting. I love it when a documentary ends on a note of irony.
From sea to shine, shining sea.
Electoral dysfunction. Where's the pill for this affliction? We need an injection to cure this infection. Electoral dysfunction.
That's not fair at all. It's not fair at all.